what I want you each to maybe take just a second to riff on is, like, what will storytelling look like at the end of this century? Will there be fundamental changes, or is this an enduring
Should I go
phenomenon?
first?
Yes, you go first. We'll go that way.
Storytelling will look exactly like it looks now. It'll be evolution, there'll be modification, there'll be new genres coming and going, but for the most part, story will be as it was, which is a character facing a problem and trying to overcome. To me, the big, impressive sort of frontier in storytelling, maybe video games. I think that there's a lot of potential there. It's a new form of storytelling where all the conventions are still being invented. And so what storytelling in video games gives you, if you watch like a video game ad, you'll notice you're watching, for the most part, a movie trailer. And the video game will insert you into the movie. You get to be the rock-jawed hero of that action film. You don't watch it from the outside. You have an interactive experience where you are in the story and you're influencing how it ends. And so like a game like World of Warcraft, you go inside of it, you're entering into a virtual reality space, and you're entering into a very rich story space with a lot of backstory. And people who play this game, who get hooked on it, describe it as being like being inside a medieval saga as it's being written, like being an author of a story and also one of the characters. So I think maybe the big growth area for storytelling as an art, maybe in video games.
Joyce?
Well, I've never played a video game, but you make it sound very, very attractive. And I think it's probably, if the video game could be increasingly nuanced and more subtle, to find you have like the Henry James.
They don't have to be action
video
movies.
game.
Yeah.
The Henry James video game, the James Joyce game.
Right.
That I think, Emily Dickinson, where you're sort of you're immersed in a sort of visual hallucinatory where you're actually in the game. It is sort of like being immersed in a great 19th century novel where there's a great context. So you're probably quite right that the basic formula, which is that art is based on conflict, that formula will probably always prevail.
I think so.
Well, I have a feeling that being an author is not as much fun as being in World of Warcraft. I mean, it's more like work than kind of play.
Yeah.
I think where we might be in 100 years, if I can tell from some of my students, is an idea of our stories being collaborative, putting something on the net that then another person anonymously does something to and changes it. So the story goes on, and there's not an author. There's the idea of genius.
Originally, stories didn't have one author.
Right.
So
we could be going back
in a circle. Yeah, that'd be interesting. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. But when I just happened to be reading an Alice Munro story last night called Cortez Island. It's about a young woman who's kind of becoming a writer. She's in a marriage that's perfectly acceptable and new, but she doesn't know. There's hints that it's not going to be great in her life, and she begins to read a lot and write, and she gets interrupted now and then in her reading, and the line is something like, she would be interrupted at the point of astonishment the book had brought her to, a giddiness of gulped riches. And when I read that for me, I'm often asked like why I read, and it's sort of that astonishment that books bring me to, and the giddiness of gulped riches that I get from reading. So that's going to have to be there in 100 years, whatever form it takes or is delivered to us in.
Keith?
Yeah. No, I mean, I very much agree with what other people have just said now. I mean, this last year I got invited to a conference, the 4th International Conference on Digital Interactive Storytelling, right? So I wasn't quite sure why they invited me, but it was nice to be there. So I think this is a new genre, and it probably will have many of the qualities that we've talked about. And the nice thing about it, you see, is it folds this idea of games back into stories, which is what we were arguing might have been some of the genesis of it. And you mentioned, Joyce, the idea of dreams. Well, you see, dreams are very important as well. And it turns out that Shakespeare's term for simulation was dream, right? So A Midsummer Night's Dream was a different world that allows us to see our own world in not just in terms of the surface behavior, but in terms of what's going on underneath. And I think that element is going to stay there, however much these different genres change.
I'll just say I really like the idea of Emily Dickinson video game.
Yeah.
We should talk about that.
Yeah, a room where you never leave the room, right? Great game.
We'll make millions. The only other thing I'll say, which is I think to somewhat echo Jonathan, which is that artists are notoriously contrary and creative, and given a theory that all stories have to be X, they will immediately rush out to do a story that's not X. And given the demands of ingenuity, given an idea that everybody wants a story that has property X, they will create stories which don't have that property. And this is true for paintings, it's true for novels, it's true for every art form. You always see this rebellion against what comes natural. But in the end, if it's true that we enjoy stories because they scratch a universal human itch, this suggests that although the sorts of stories will become infinitely and more diverse, still, the stories that people enjoy with pleasure, that willingly and joyfully appreciate, will not be all that different from the ones we have now and the ones we had thousands of years ago.
Reach their destination
How do you feel?
and this epic journey